She wasn't supposed to live past childhood. Her planet tried to kill her every day with storms that could shatter mountains, beasts that hunted her in packs, and quakes that split the ground beneath her feet. She learned to run on broken bones, to fight with nothing but her bare hands, and to sleep with one eye open, because even the moonlight might betray her. Her people thought her a demon, a curse. But when humans finally arrived, those fragile off-worlders, they didn't run. They didn't cower. They watched, they learned, and then they reached out a hand and said, "Teach us." In that moment, she realized she wasn't just a survivor. She was a living legend, and humanity was ready to follow her into the wild unknown. The air on Turion 9 tasted like iron and ash. It seared her lungs every dawn when she woke beneath the broken canopy of twisted black trees. The branches above her were knotted and sharp as spears, a constant reminder that the world itself wanted her gone. Her name, if it could be called that, was Asha. In her own mind, it meant nothing more than breath and bone, because those were the only things she truly owned. She had no tribe, no mother. No one ever claimed her. On this Deathworld, offspring were considered curses if they survived longer than a week, proof that something unnatural clung to them. Asha had survived 17 cycles of the Crimson Sun. In that time, she learned to move silently through the acid mists, to drink rain squeezed from moss that burned her tongue, to make a spear from the broken teeth of a ground beast. When the wolves came at night, those six-eyed shadows with jaws strong enough to snap trees, she didn't scream. She didn't flee in blind terror like other abandoned young. She waited, crouched in the mud, her muscles coiled like a viper. When they lunged, she moved faster than their minds could follow, driving a shard of stone into the soft place behind their ears. Each time she killed, she sang to herself. A low humming sound, no words, just vibration against her ribs. It kept her heartbeat slow. It reminded her that she was still alive. The world might break her body, but it would never claim her song. The ground quaked often on Turion 9. Cracks would split beneath her feet without warning, swallowing entire groves into molten chasms. She learned to sleep lightly, with her fingers resting on the thin cracks, feeling tremors before they became disasters. When the earth yawned open, she would leap across like a dancer, dirt spraying around her, sometimes landing inches from death. Those who saw her, if anyone did, believed she was an omen. Once, a small hunting group of her kind found her tracks and followed them, hoping to scavenge whatever she might have killed. They found her standing alone, blood steaming off her shoulders, a wolf pelt wrapped around her thin body. She turned to face them, her eyes reflecting moonlight like pale coins. One by one, they dropped their spears and fled. After that, she became a ghost story among them. The young whispered her legend beside their dying fires, calling her the Moonscorned. Some claimed she wasn't real at all, a cautionary spirit to frighten children. But Asha was real. Her skin was always marked with shallow cuts that never fully healed, her muscles toughened from endless hunts. Her black hair tangled down her back like a wild river. Her fingers were calloused and strong enough to snap bone. She no longer felt pain as others did. Each morning she woke alive, and that was enough. She counted years by her scars. 17 cycles meant hundreds of scars, each with a memory. The shallow claw mark across her cheek, she'd earned it fighting a mantis beast that tried to gut her during a storm. The long tear down her left thigh, that was from the day she leaped across a boiling river and didn't quite make it. Her right forearm bore deep ridges from when a thunderhawk snatched her in its talons and tried to lift her skyward. She bit its leg until it dropped her, tumbling through the air, breaking her ribs but not her spirit. No one taught her language beyond basic survival sounds. She listened to the wind, to the deep roaring of the earth's belly, to the heavy snorting of the ground beasts. Nature was her only tutor. Then, one dusk, the sky split open in a new way. Asha heard a sharp shriek, like a giant iron hawk, echoing across the cliffs. Above her, a ship, metallic gleaming with foreign lights, descended through the orange clouds. The air shimmered around it, throwing spirals of dust into the jungle below. She watched from her perch in a bone tree, body still as carved stone. Her eyes narrowed. A new predator? A new plague? She did not know. But she felt the earth recoil beneath her, as though the world itself feared what was coming. The ship landed on a patch of blackened stone, crushing ash flowers and glass ferns. A hiss followed, and a ramp extended down. Figures emerged, tall, encased in thick suits, shining under the last light of the day. She counted 6. Their movements were hesitant, as though afraid each step might kill them. They carried strange tools, flickering screens, small cylindrical devices that clicked and hummed. Asha tilted her head, listening. The air trembled with their words, foreign and clipped. She could not understand, but she recognized fear. She saw it in the hunch of their shoulders, the way they kept turning to scan the horizon. Humans. She had never seen them before, but she had heard legends in the winds, beings who lived on gentle worlds, who crafted impossible machines, who burned through stars like lanterns. They were said to be fragile, yet terrifying in numbers and mind. She followed them for days, moving in the canopy or through the underbrush. They never saw her. She watched them stumble on thorns that she learned to ignore as a child, saw them yelp when a small emberworm crawled across their boots. She saw them marvel at the glowing vines she used to bind her shelters, and she saw them taste the sweet pollen from the moonflowers, pollen she knew would leave them hallucinating and blind if they weren't careful. One night, a quake struck. The humans camped near a ravine, too close. Asha heard the first low rumble as she crouched in a hollow tree, her fingers on the earth. She leaped into motion, sprinting toward their camp. She wasn't sure why, perhaps curiosity, perhaps some impulse deeper than reason. She reached the edge just as the ground yawned open. One human fell in immediately, vanishing into molten glow. Two others clung to the crumbling edge, screaming. The others stood paralyzed, useless. Asha didn't think. She roared, a raw guttural sound that silenced the remaining humans instantly. She leaped across the fissure, snatching one by the collar of their suit, dragging them away from the brink. The second she caught by the wrist, yanking them backward before the earth gave way. When she stopped, all 5 remaining humans stared at her, their wide eyes bright behind transparent face shields. She stood panting, her hair stuck to her cheeks, black mud streaked across her chest. One hand still clutched the wrist of the trembling human she'd saved. Then, she realized what she had done. She hissed, dropped the wrist, and took a step back. But none of them ran. None of them screamed. The one she saved first, shorter than the others with soft eyes, reached a shaking hand toward her. They said something in a soft, melodic tone. She didn't understand the words, but the meaning vibrated inside her bones. "Thank you." Asha tilted her head, confused. She expected terror or aggression. Instead, she saw relief, respect, even awe. In that frozen moment, she felt something change inside her. All her life she had been prey and predator, alone against the world. She survived because she was invisible, because she was myth. But now, these fragile bright creatures looked at her as if she were not a demon, but a savior. One human knelt, touching the ground as if in prayer. Another held out a small metal cylinder, water. Clean, pure water. Asha watched them, her eyes flicking from face to face. For the first time in her life, she didn't hear the whisper of the wind telling her to run. She heard something else, something like a heartbeat, shared across all of them. She stepped forward and accepted the water. It was cold and smooth on her tongue. She let it run down her throat, feeling it soothe old wounds she didn't know were still open. One by one, they lowered their tools, their guards, their fears. She understood nothing of their language, but everything of their emotion. She stayed that night, crouched by their fire, watching the flames dance like little stars. They offered her strange dried rations. She sniffed, tasted, and nodded. Edible. The humans laughed softly, a sound she had never heard before. Like rain tapping gently on leaves instead of a storm tearing them away. In the morning, she woke to find one human sketching her in a notebook. Another adjusted a device that scanned her scars, her muscles. They were studying her, not as an enemy or a monster, but as a wonder. Asha felt her fingers curl into the dirt. She did not like being watched, being reduced to lines on paper. But then the human with the soft eyes looked at her, mouthed something slowly. She thought she heard a word. Teach. Asha's eyes widened. They did not want to kill her. They did not want to take her pelt or run from her ghost. They wanted to learn. To understand her world through her eyes, to survive as she had. That was the moment a seed took root inside her. A possibility she had never allowed herself to imagine. Not just survival, something beyond it. Connection. Purpose. Asha glanced at the forest edge, where shadows flickered and memories called. She looked back at the humans, these fragile bright-eyed beings from the stars, who shivered in the cold yet dared to touch her world. She stayed. And as the sun rose over the broken canopy, she realized she had been waiting her whole life for someone to ask her to teach them how to live. Asha rose before the humans stirred, as she always did. Morning mist wrapped around the camp like ghostly fingers, cool against her skin. She moved silently, checking the ground for fresh wolf tracks and new fissures. The air smelled different now, still harsh, but touched by a softer warmth she couldn't name. When she returned, the humans were waking. They moved slowly, groaning as they stretched their fragile bodies, and she realized how much they depended on their thick suits and glowing tools. Without those, they would already be bones beneath the thorn trees. Yet despite their weakness, They looked at her each dawn with something she had never seen before: trust. The small human with soft eyes, she began to think of them as Song, because their voice always carried warmth, stepped forward, offering her a piece of dried ration. Asha accepted it with a quick nod. Song smiled, their face lighting up in a way that confused and calmed her at once. That day, they followed her deeper into the jungle, notebooks clutched tight, devices whirring and blinking. She showed them where to find safe water. The moonflowers they had once tasted in ignorance could be squeezed into a clear stream if done carefully, their toxins turned to nutrients by the silver moss that grew near hot stones. She showed them how to listen for tremors by pressing their palms into the dirt. She taught them to smear bitter mud on their necks and wrists so the flying blood hunters wouldn't track their warmth. The humans watched her every move, copying her motions with reverence. They fell often, bruising their knees and wrists, but they never gave up. Asha felt something inside her chest loosen, a weight she hadn't known she carried. Before, she had lived only for the next breath, the next day. Now, she watched as these fragile beings began to move more surely, more like her. They learned her rhythms, her silences. Days became weeks. She taught them to make simple shelters from glass ferns and bone trees, showed them which mushrooms would help close wounds and which would peel a tongue into ribbons. When wolves circled at night, she sat by the fire and sang her wordless hum, the one that kept her alive in the dark. One evening, Song hummed along, their shaky voice echoing hers, a timid shadow beside her steady tone. Asha turned sharply at first, startled. No one had ever dared join her song. But she saw Song's face glowing in the firelight, eyes closed in pure trust. Slowly, she let her voice fall into harmony with theirs. The other humans listened, leaning closer, as though hearing the heartbeat of the forest for the first time. They called her Asha. They said it carefully, reverently, pressing the syllables like blessings against their tongues. When she heard them say her name, something deep inside her stirred, an echo of belonging. She never spoke human words, but they seemed to understand her silences and her gestures. They wrote notes in their books, sketched her face, her scars, her movements. But now, instead of shrinking away, she watched them draw, curious to see how they saw her. Then, the day came when the human's metal bird returned from the sky. Its rumbling engines split the clouds, scattering flocks of ember crows. They looked at her, eyes shining with sorrow and excitement. They beckoned her, pointing toward the ship. She understood. They had to leave. Their time on her world, her Deathworld, had ended. Asha stood at the forest edge, her spear resting against her shoulder. The humans gathered their notes and samples, the tools she had taught them to craft from bones and glass ferns. Song came last, stepping forward with trembling hands. They held out a small object, a smooth round stone, painted with delicate lines like flowing rivers. Asha tilted her head, examining it. Song placed it in her palm and closed her fingers around it. Then, they pressed their forehead gently to hers, a gesture she had never known but somehow felt deeply. When they stepped back, she saw tears slipping down Song's cheeks inside the helmet. Asha looked at the stone in her hand, felt its warmth. She understood. It was a promise. A mark that she was not forgotten, that her lessons, her songs, her survival would live on among the stars. The other humans saluted her, each in their own clumsy, heartfelt way. She nodded once to each of them. Then she watched as they climbed the ramp, the doors closing like a giant heartbeat. The engines roared, lifting the ship toward the crimson clouds, higher and higher, until they became a silver star in the darkening sky. She stood alone for a long time, the forest around her strangely silent. She felt the warmth of the stone in her hand and closed her eyes. Days passed. The forest reclaimed the humans' campsite quickly. Vines curled over their fire pits, glass ferns bent to cover the footprints. But Asha was different now. She carried the stone always, tied to a leather thong around her neck. When she hunted, she heard Song's gentle humming echo in her mind. When the ground quaked, she thought of the humans' clumsy but determined steps beside her. She realized that she had taught them to survive, but they had taught her something greater, the shape of her own heart. One night, as stars glimmered like frost across the black sky, she climbed the tallest bone tree. The winds roared around her, tugging at her hair and tearing at her scars. She looked up, imagining the humans far beyond, their ship cutting through the void. She did not feel small or alone anymore. She felt endless. Asha raised her head and began to hum, not just her old survival song, but a new one, woven with warmth and light. The forest below listened. The moon listened. And perhaps somewhere, the humans listened too. She understood now that survival had never been her true gift. It was her spirit, her fire, her refusal to die, and the gentle patience she shared once she stopped running. She pressed the stone to her chest, feeling it pulse against her heart. She was no longer just the moon-scorned ghost of the Deathworld. She was a teacher, a bridge, a living legend. And though her students had returned to the stars, her song would echo forever among the trees, the cracks in the earth, and the rising winds. Asha smiled into the night, her teeth sharp and gleaming, her eyes reflecting starlight. She had survived the wolves, the quakes, the impossible, and now she had survived loneliness itself. She was not alone. She never would be again.